I always say I came a block and a half in 50 years. My grandfather came to East St. Louis in 1927 and somehow or other opened the restaurant Scoville's Cafe. My father lived in Pike County. He went broke in 1931, 1932, came to East St. Louis to go to work for his father. His father told him he had a job for him, that he would pay him, he worked from 6 at night to 6 in the morning as a dishwasher, and he would pay him $1 a day. And I was born and we lived above what we called the department store. It was vacant, as I remember. But I was 4 or 5 years old, and I'd get up in the morning and go down to my dad's restaurant at First and Sinclair. He and Mother both worked, and we go down there and have breakfast, my sister and I, walking down Whiskey Chute. The ladies of the night were generally up by that time. It would be 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and they just loved little children. And they'd put us on their laps, and they'd take us into the bar and give us candy and gum and soda and anything we wanted. My grandpa, he had a hotel right the other side of the viaduct where we lived, and I'd go in there before we went down the chute. I'd go to my grandpa's and get a shave every morning. By the time we got to the restaurant, we were filled up with grandpas and the ladies, and it was quite an experience. My grandfather, he also was a horse trader, cattleman. So as a boy, I spent a lot of time with him in the stockyards, and you got to know the people that worked there, and they were like nobody I've ever met since. Everybody seemed to be on the upside, and every day was the 4th of July in the stockyards. 2 square mile radius, that we had maybe 20,000 jobs. 3 major packing houses: Swift, Armour, Hunter, Allied Industries, Robertson Farm Supply, Abe Snyder's Clothing, and of course Whiskey Chute, and the stockyards itself. Continental Can, the packing houses and Continental Can during the war and thereafter, shortly, they ran 24 hours a day, so they were staffed 24 hours a day. In the restaurant, we would set there were 50 or 45 or 50 of them would come every day for lunch, supper, and a meal on the midnight shift. And we'd set the table for them, and they would come in, and they all had the same place, and they'd give us their orders, and it was there when they got there because they only had 30 minutes. You couldn't imagine today the business we did in that place. My father, his place burnt down. He was on Whiskey Chute next to the English Inn. The English Inn was a hotel nightclub operation. Had a piano player, Bill Hart. On one corner they had a bookie. They had the wire, and the races come over the wire. The writer would write down the results, and you could bet as little as a dime. And I remember as a kid, 8, 9 years old, I'd go in the bookies and make a bet once in a while. But nonetheless, you had to see it to believe it. I look back on those days, and I think that when the stockyards was at its peak, it's kind of like us going to Las Vegas today. The farmer would load his hogs or cattle and come to the stockyards 75 to 100 miles from home, and there was gambling, there was prostitutes, there was anything you want you could get on Whiskey Chute. And he was a calf salesman, and probably the number 1 calf salesman in the yards. He'd get 2,500, 3,000 calves on a Monday, and very, very good at what he did, and had a tremendous following. But in 1960, he packed it up and went to work with an uncle over in St. Louis in the insurance business. And I asked him, what do you mean you're leaving? I was shocked. And he said, Jack, it's time. He said, this place is not going to be here 20 years from now. And he was much more farsighted than the rest of us. Nobody could see it coming. The interstate highways, when Eisenhower built the interstate highways for us, We thought that would be a boom to the yards because it would make it a little easier for the livestock, the trucker, the livestock person to get to the yards. But what we didn't realize, what all it did was make it easier to get to the packing houses and what they call direct sale. I look back and I try to think of some bad things, but I can't think of any bad things. There just wasn't any, not for me. And it was, again, every day was the 4th of July. If you worked at St. Louis National Stockyards Company, or St. Louis National Stockyards.